Secret of the Mimic is here, and frankly, it's one of the best FNAF games we've ever gotten. It might be my favorite FNAF game they've made so far. It's really that good. The gameplay, the horror, the writing, everything about it I enjoy. But as much deserved praise as the game is getting, a lot of people are walking away from the story a bit confused, which I guess is the mark of a good FNAF game, especially after any other ending besides the first. So what did that game mean? What did its endings mean, and how does it connect to the grander story? Well, Slices, put on your aprons and let's find out the secret of the Mimic. Don't worry, that'll be the only time I make that pun. As far as the basic story of the game, we are Arnold, a sleep-deprived, wet, sopping towel of a man whom I love. We also work for Fazbear Entertainment, and dispatch tells us that we have one last shift for the day. Edwin Murray is a contractor for Fazbear, but he's disappeared. And per his contract, now everything he's been working on is forfeit to Fazbear, so we just have to go and collect whatever he was working on. We're warned that several motion sensors in the building indicate something's moving around, but we're then told it's probably nothing. So we enter Murray's costume manor and quickly find dispatch through an intercom system in the building itself. Once we're inside and the power's on, dispatch levels with us. He tells us that the thing moving around is likely an endoskeleton. One of the last things Murray was working on was an endoskeleton that could fit into any costume and replicate the persona of any character. It would have been really useful to have if it didn't have, quote, homicidal glitches. But if we're able to find the original schematics for the endoskeleton, we can not only fix it, but then Fazbear can use it in all of their animatronics. So Arnold does just that. That's our main goal in the game, to retrieve the original schematics of the Mimic endoskeleton and fix the Mimic so Fazbear can use it in all of their animatronics. As we go through the facility, we have to hide from the Mimic and defend ourselves from the various costumes that it takes. First Jackie in the Box, then Big Top, who I thought was Big Top Music Man, but I think he's only ever referred to as Big Top, but obviously you see the connection here. Dolly the Nurse, and Chica. Yeah, literally Chica the Chicken. This story takes place while Chica the Chicken still belonged to Chica's Party World, and was soon to be, or just recently was acquired by Fazbear. Eventually though, you get the executive status on your data diver, which allows you full reign of the facility and the Mimic schematics, the reason we came here. After a weirdly ghost supernatural encounter with this white tiger costume, we make it back to the main office and we talk one more time to dispatch, who says job well done and tells us to return the data diver to dispatch through the inventory system in the building. This is where we start to get the different endings of the game. If you give the data diver through the inventory system to dispatch and leave, you're able to get into your van and go. But once you get into your van, dispatch calls you over the radio and tells you they've been trying to get in contact with Arnold all night, and that they have to fire him because he hasn't been answering his calls. Arnold explains that he's been talking to dispatch the entire night and just gave dispatch the data diver, to which the dispatch in the van says that we admitted giving away company property and that we're going to be sued for losses. But if all that wasn't enough, in the back of the van, Arnold notices a light, and adjusting the mirror, the Mimic tagged along for a ride. It reaches towards us and knocks us out, and we come to inside of the suit of what appears to be a prototype Freddy Fazbear in what appears to be a prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, right next to a prototype version of Chica and Bonnie performing on stage for the Mimic. Frankly, it's an ending that rightly has been called out as very similar to the main ending of Help Wanted, and that's not an accident, but we'll get there in due time. So that's the basic plot of the game, but already some things aren't adding up. It doesn't take a genius to realize that Dispatch was the Mimic the whole time we were in the building. But if that's the case, why was Dispatch trying to get us to work against the Mimic? Or rather, why was the Mimic hunting us down and trying to stop us if our goal was explicitly for the Mimic? Well, to understand that, and the other two endings, we need to start talking about the stories underneath the surface level of this game, starting with the story of the entire business itself, Murray's Costume Manor, and its eventual downfall. Murray's Costume Manor was originally owned by Edwin Murray's father, Edwin Sr., but working at the facility as a creative inventor, Edwin Murray found great success with his product, the Cleanovac. Frankly, it was the most successful thing he'd ever created. They made statues of this thing. It was so wildly popular. Ever since then, he'd been trying to chase that feeling and make something bigger than the Cleanovac, and failing it every time. Edwin Sr. died a little earlier than expected, and Edwin Murray, still very young, inherited the entire entire business. He wasn't a businessman, but he would have to try his best to keep the business alive. He kept throwing out more and more Murray co-inventions, but they were often half-baked or had serious problems that weren't found until it was too late. All these inventions ended up causing was more lawsuits and more costs to the company. The costumes the facility created were selling fairly well, and that's where pretty much any of their money came in, because the inventions just kept costing the company more and more. But luckily, while the company was in a bit of a downward spiral, longtime business partners Fazbear Entertainment approached with a contract that was a bit too big to refuse for how the company was running. If Edwin could get this Fazbear contract done, they'd have enough money for everything to go back to normal. The commission is never specified, but judging from what's been created in-game, it seems to be an entire prototype replica of a pizzeria, befitted with prototype animatronics, a bear, chicken, and bunny to perform on stage, and 2 Springlock suits, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Very important note here, these are all prototypes, to the point where the main band looks like they're made out of scrap metal, and the Springlock suits literally have prototype on the back, so I don't think these are the finished versions that end up being used by Fazbear. I want to be clear here on that. Fazbear kept approving the project as it went on, approving all of the art and all of the directions that the things were taking shape in, but as they started getting to the end, Fazbear kept sending more and more change requests, costing more time and money and making Edwin have to throw out months of work at a time. At this point, Edwin was at the end of his rope, the end of his money, and about to lose the only contract that could save this company. But he didn't know until it was too late that this was all part of the plan. On the other side of this contract, whether through jealousy or wanting to dominate the market, William and Henry had planned to ruin Murray Co. with this contract from the start. They wanted to absorb Murray's Costume Manor, all of its assets, and as many employees as it could. So they made a contract with Edwin Murray, one so big that it would nearly capsize Murray's Costume Manor if it failed, but so lucrative that Edwin, who's very trusting and very desperate, couldn't refuse. Especially since it seems as though Edwin and Henry were close long-term friends. They were on a nickname basis, and some lines have Edwin saying, "like we always do." As the company weaned on this secret project, William Afton started secretly contacting several Murray Costume Manor employees and offering them better positions with better pay, even offering bonuses if they can bring over other Murray's Costume Manor employees with them. To top it off, they made the contract more difficult as it went on, changing requirements, telling them to change everything by the end of it, and just making it generally impossible to work with.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approve the art, then they approve the proofs. Now they change their minds when we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. It doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
And after everything began to fail, and the company begins to default, and employees are leaving left and right, William Afton and Henry Emily offer Edwin one final solution, and we get the second half of that letter. Software development and the entire MCM catalog. We would love to keep you on as a lead engineer. Although we now technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. We feel this offer has been more than fair, considering how far behind you are. It's just too much for you to handle alone. We are waiting for your response. WA. At its lowest point, Fazbear buys all of MCM, all of its property, and all of its remaining software. They even offer Edwin a job as lead engineer, but I get the feeling he was never able to take it. In fact, this audio log tells me that this is around the time he shuts himself off in the Manor to work on the Mimic some more.
Edwin, never forget.
What?
They're behind it.
What?
Don't trust them. Never tell them. They want to destroy you. Dad was right.
Also, if this video is helpful to you and you like FNAF, I make a weekly FNAF themed podcast and a weekly FNAF or other horror game theory every Friday, so subscribe and stay a while. And if you like gaming, I stream on twitch.tv/RyToastYT 4 days a week, every single week, and I edit down and upload those streams and clips to RyToost, my second channel. And if you like audiobooks or compilations, I upload that to my third channel, RyDoze, and I just started a D&D campaign with these amazing creators as well on that channel. So if you like any of that, go find it. The links are in the description and on screen. Look, I hope this video does well, and if it does, I'm gonna self-indulge a little bit. This business side story is what we begin to see in the two other endings of the game. If instead of giving the data driver to Dispatch, you instead run the Parachute.exe program with your newly found executive permissions, a secret hatch opens up in the office. Immediately, Dispatch drops the act and starts threatening you, saying that it's too late, you won't make it out alive, and that it is going to catch you and stuff you into a suit. You go through this secret tunnel to end up at the Welcome Show lobby, to which you can now play the Goodbye Show, which allows you into a lower part of the facility, the same part where that secret prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was being created. Once we get there and turn on the power, the Mimic arrives too, putting on an amalgamation of Fazbear parts and looking really cool while doing it. We have to use the prototype springlock suits that were created here to get into the security office, as Dispatch, or whatever Dispatch really is inside the security office of the prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is keeping us out using the security cameras and locking doors on us. It's essentially playing FNAF 1 in reverse, which is an incredibly cool concept. Eventually, when we drain enough power, Dispatch relents as there's nothing more they can do and lets us inside the security office, to which we see this. So if we've been being chased by the Mimic the whole time, what is this? Well, to explain that, we'll need to delve into the personal lives of Edwin, Fiona, and David Murray. Oh my god, Jesus, Mark. Now, I think I should put a bit of a disclaimer at the rest of this video. So far, I've only barely speculated on the lore of this game. A lot of what I've said is pretty much in the text or just barely implied. Like, it's very clear this is kind of how the business stuff went, this is what the Fazbear contract was, yada yada. However, uncovering the true story of Edwin's family life is a lot trickier. There's a lot of weird details that don't perfectly line up that we're going to have to speculate on. So take what I'm about to say about their family with a grain of salt. It could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, this is my best guess for how Edwin's family life was. And also, in this video, I don't have too much time to go into every piece of evidence as to why I believe this. So I'll show relevant evidence in the background as I mention things, and I'll point out some evidence as I go, but as far as deep dives into the evidence itself, like moon.exe, you'll have to wait for future videos for that, because trust me, we're going to be talking about this game for years to come. Edwin met Fiona while working at MCM, and eventually they got married and had a son named David. However, as the business started to go sour, Edwin began burying himself deeper and deeper into his work, ignoring and neglecting both Fiona and David, and eventually tragedy strikes. Fiona went to go help the Fall Fest crew set up for their first annual show, but unfortunately, at that Fall Fest was a fire, and Fiona died inside. This is a deviation from the lore we know from the books, but I think this is the most likely answer here, as a statue in moon.exe depicts her as burnt with the snow globe of the first ever Fall Fest, and we know from the audio logs that she went to Fall Fest, and after she dies, Edwin's first audio log is, "Why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there." In her wake, Edwin is at a loss. He doesn't understand how to keep working at his job, keep taking care of his son, and keep everything together, until eventually, one day, he swears he hears Fiona in the basement of the facility.
Recording? Test. Levels are good. This is where I heard it. It's her or someone that sounds like her. Set frequency to 4625. Hello? Hello?
Oh my god.
Is anyone there? Over. Say something. It's me, Edwin. Over.
It's a voice that's been recorded on devices before, but he swears that it's her spirit manipulating this. So near that basement, he begins working on the Mimic. Building it off of the technology he's already had in several other inventions, his goal is not necessarily to replace Fiona, but to make something that can help him watch David the only way that he knows how. And eventually he does make M1, an endoskeleton that can fit into any costume, change its shape into any size, but most importantly, recreate any personality. And somehow it works, and it adopts the persona of Fiona quite quickly. But M1 tells Edwin to keep Fiona's identity a secret, as the others might not understand. So Edwin presents M1 to David as his new babysitter and companion, something that can put on costumes and play with him and take care of him while Edwin gets some work done. This does sort of work for a time. M1 is Fiona when Edwin's around and just the mimic when everyone else is, and M1 can take care of David while Edwin works. But eventually, tragedy strikes again. On his birthday, David ends up dying at the playground that Edwin built for him, and he takes this loss especially hard. But M1 convinces him there's another way. M1 reassures him that even though this loss was an accident and unavoidable, he can fix it. He's done it before. Look at Fiona. So Edwin tries his best to make M2, a robot that could theoretically replace David, just as M1 replaced Fiona. But for some reason, it just won't work. M1 worked, and he's still not sure why. I think it's likely that M1 is possessed by Fiona herself, and that's the spark that Edwin can't seem to recreate. Eventually, growing desperate, M1 is willing to give up her body so that M2, David, could take it, and M1 can wait for Edwin to make another body in the meantime. So Fiona is moved into the MXES, Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage Container. It's then renamed to F10N4, or Leet Speech for Fiona, and she waits there, while Edwin is supposed to make David out of the remaining body. And it begins to work, but it begins to work too well. Edwin starts to realize that this has all gone on much too far. None of this is his real family, none of this will bring them back. And once that robot started mimicking David, copying his mannerisms and acting like him, it was too far, and it was too painful. In a fit of rage, yelling at this robot that it's not David and it can't replace him, he beats the mimic and destroys its legs. Soon after, in the Manor, an experiment in Edwin's office goes wrong, and an explosion traps him in the rubble. It's unclear if M2 made it this way, but it's clear that at this point, M2 wasn't destroyed, just beaten, as we get this very chilling audio log in the aftermath of the explosion.
Test. Journal entry. Too bad the new power test was a failure.
M2!
Due to a minor detonation.
M2's the one speaking?
There is damage to my office interior, as well as a small fire. Note to self, portable cleaner that gets rid of smoke damage. Ooh, better yet, a Cleanovac attachment.
Help! M2! Respond! Emergency! Call for help!
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
Please! I can't move. I can't feel my legs.
You know, speaking of legs, what do you think? I just finished mine. There are still a few kinks to work out.
I'm sorry, M2. I lost my temper. I was always gonna fix you. Please, call for help. M2, respond.
Oh, can't right now, buddy. We can do something fun tomorrow. I promise. Ask your mom if she's not busy.
This is insane.
Help.
And there we have Fiona, M1, inside of the MXES system, and this amalgamation of David and Edwin and the agony involved inside of M2. Again, there is more to this story, especially in Fiona's motivations and possible culprits behind David's death, but those are better served for later videos that focus on those topics. For now, with that context of the family in mind, let's go back to the other two endings of this game. When you meet Fiona in the security office, she tells you that you can still be useful. After all, we've collected the schematics for the Mimic. She's convinced if we can give these schematics to Edwin, he can repair M2 so M2 can go back to being David again. It'll fix this violent glitch in him and he can be their sweet little boy, and Fiona can have a child once more. So you take Edwin's tunnel to the Manor itself, and M2 is already pacing the halls looking for you. And here is where you have two endings. The second ending has you make it into Edwin's office after figuring out the code, and that's where you find that it's exploded and you hear that audio log. But you activate Cradle.exe, and then attempt to escape. The Mimic and several of the failed Mimic 2 copies are chasing you the whole time as the facility burns down around you. You do make it to your van, but so do they, and in the car chase trying to escape, eventually the Mimic itself breaks through your windshield and causes a crash. In the wreckage, Arnold seems to maybe die, it's unclear, but the Mimic doesn't go for the kill. Instead, it just takes your data diver, attaches it to itself, and walks off into the night. But if you've collected every collectible and beaten Moon.exe, which will definitely get its own video, you'll receive the glitched permission to your data diver, which allows you to access all the other doors in the Manor. Inside of all of them are cassette tapes with bedtime stories on them. Once all of them are collected, you get event access to this boarded up door, which houses David's room. Once inside, the Mimic exits the closet and begins getting confused on what it's meant to do here. So if you use the storybook recordings of David's parents, M2 will fight back and forth between trying to kill you and trying to be David, until eventually you confuse it enough that you've stunned it and inject the data diver into its programming, uploading the original schematic and repairing M2. Once you've done this, it easily reverts back to David and acts just like him, going to bed and telling his parents that he loves them. So at the end of all of this, which of these endings is canon? How does the Mimic end up at security breach after all of this? Does Arnold survive? Well, these are all questions for other days, but I think the most important question that I can capstone this video with is solving what is the secret of the Mimic. After all, the title of the game implies that there is one singular secret that we are supposed to walk away from and know. And we learned a lot about the Mimic in this game. He's got like at least 8 secrets. I think with all of the information we get in this game, the main secret we are supposed to walk away from, and the thing that explains a lot of previous games made by Steelwool and Scott Cawthon, is that the secret of the Mimic is that there are 2. One of them, M1, was originally Fiona, but is a more digital version of the Mimic, something that's able to replicate personalities. And the other one, M2, is an endoskeleton with violent tendencies that's just trying to lash out against its environment and the world around it that never cared for it. It definitively explains why in the games, Glitchtrap and the Mimic seem like 2 different entities. They are. They're 2 separate iterations of the same idea. But then how does Fiona turn into Glitchtrap? We are so back. Mysteries are back on the menus, boys. And that's pretty much all I think is relevant to cover today. But let me know what you thought of the game in the comments below. And if you still need to catch up on gameplay, I took all 3 of my streams, edited down the downtime, and made it one long 13-hour video playthrough of all of my playthroughs and all 3 endings on the second channel, which you can find right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. And until next time, as always, stay toasty slices.